Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. We are about to begin chapter 21, that is Perek Chaf Aleph. This chapter has several very famous verses, ideas that many of you will be familiar with, and a lot of profoundly beautiful thoughts and lessons, as we have come to expect from Sefer Mishlei, from the wisdom of King Solomon. So it begins, Palge Mayim Lev Melech Biad Adonai Al Kol Asher Yachbotz Yatenu. The phrase Lev Melech Biad Hashem, the heart of a king is in the hand of God, is a phrase heard often when people are talking about policies of the government, policies of the president, policies of the king or whoever is the leader, that ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, it has entered the experience of the Jewish people, of the ideas that abound, that somehow the choices they make in their lives, although of course they make them of free choice, but somehow there's even more influence that God has on the decisions that are made by leaders in those positions, because of course they affect the course of the nation that they're responsible for, in fact, the very course of history itself. Over here, it's kind of making that point here that a lot of people, when they say Lev Melech Biad Hashem, is kind of missing half the point, because it says Palge Mayim. The heart of a king is in the hand of God, as if they were channels of water. Palge Mayim, channels of water. So in other words, just like a farmer in his field will direct the flow of water around the field to however he wants, he'll direct water this way, that way, the other way, in order to maximize the watering of his crops, right? So too is the Lev Melech Biad Hashem. And it kind of gives you the sense that the king wants to go in a certain direction, like the water wants to go in a certain direction. But God is the one who channels that energy into this direction or that direction. Al Kol Asher Yachbotz Yatenu, God will tilt it or twist it or turn it, or the case of the parable to the farmer, into whichever direction he wants to. That next verse 2, is another very famous one, called Derech Ish Yashar Be'einav. Every path of man seems right in his eyes. Everybody thinks they're on the right path in life, right? Everybody thinks that my path in life is the right one. However, V'tochein libos Adonai, God is the one who knows what's going on in our hearts. He knows if the path we chose in our life is truly yashar, is truly proper, is truly right, or if it is being done for selfish or other reasons. Verse 3, Aso tzedakah o mishpat, this is another famous one. To do justice and righteousness, tzedek u mishpat, is the phrase that is repeated throughout the words of the prophets and the writings over and over again. The ultimate goal of the Torah is to teach us tzedakah o mishpat, and to create a world of tzedek u mishpat, justice and righteousness. To do that is better, is more choice-worthy, is more desired by God than zevach, than bringing sacrifices to Him. A thought that is repeated often throughout the words of the prophets, especially, that God is not interested in your rituals and sacrifices. He's interested in tzedek umishpat, justice and righteousness. Rum einayim urechav lev, one who raises his eyes and has pride in his heart. In other words, again, arrogance is the ultimate opposite of tzedek umishpat. A person has raises his eyes. This is rum einayim. This is a reference to being haughty and arrogant. Nir rishoim chatas. The nir rishoim, the plowing of a rasha, of an evil person, is sin. So what does this verse mean? It's a little bit choppy the way it's written, but Rum Einayim Rechav Lev is like an announcement saying haughtiness, right? Right. This is what a rasha, an evil person, has when he plows. When a normal person plows, a good person plows, or does anything in life that is preparing for the future, preparing for what will hopefully result in something beneficial to the person doing it, is for sustenance, is for food, right? When we prepare anything in life, when we educate for a career or whatever. But an evil person who is haughty, when he is preparing, he's preparing himself for sin. He's preparing himself for a bounty and a career in sin. Verse 5, Machshevos chorutz ach lemosar. The plans of a person who are diligent, right, when are being done in order to gain more. So someone who's diligent and careful and acting the proper way and planning properly, he's planning for more profit. He's planning for more growth. So, for example, in our thing before, he's making sure that he's plowing properly. He's making sure that he's planting the right crops properly, etc., so that his planning results in benefit, in extra, in a better crop. But if you rush and you don't do it right, in the end you are going to get less. You are going to be missing. You are going to lose. So this is a plug for being careful and planning and doing it right rather than doing it fast. Po al otzaros bilashon shaker. Treasures are acquired. Treasures that are acquired. Otzaros, treasures or wealth that is acquired. Right? Poal means the things that you do that gain otzaros bilashon shaker, through lying, through deceit, through cheating. That those kinds of gains are hevel nidaf, are like a mist that's blown away, mivakshe maves, which ends up searching out and going towards maves, towards death. What we gain through illicit means is temporary. It might feel good for a moment, but it's like a hevel nidaf. It's like a mist that just blows away, and in the end you lose it, and in the end you are saddened to the point of death. Verse 7, Shod Rishaim Yigorem. The Shod Yisharim, that is the Shod is like Lishdod is like booty that people take in war, that people take through violence from other people, right? So the things that evil people take from others through violence, Yigorem, it ends up sweeping those evil people away. It pushes them away, right? Ki me'anu lasos mishpat. Why? Because they refused to be just, right? Because they acted. This is a kind of just a corollary to the previous verse. Things that they gained through violence, in the end, that person is going to end up in jail. He's going to end up being hated by society. He's going to end up by someone else who's more violent and stronger than him, taking away his things. That is, when one chooses a life of violence and crime, it ends up pushing him away. It doesn't have a good end. Hafachfach derech ish vazar. There's various ways to translate or understand this verse. I'm going to go with Mitsudos here because it's just such a perfect understanding. So, if a person is a zar, is a stranger, is a person who has a twisted way of looking at doing things, and he's not trustworthy, he's not reliable, hafachfach. He's an hafachfach, which means he's constantly changing his mind. Sometimes he does it right, sometimes he doesn't. He's going back and forth. Sometimes he does good, sometimes he does bad. That path, vazar, that makes him a strange person, an unreliable person. Vizach, but a pure person who's straight, yashar pa'alo, his actions will be straight, his actions will be consistent. This is how the Mitsudos understands it, and that's how I'm translating it. There are other ways to translate this verse, but I chose that one. Verse 9, Tov lasheves al pinas gog. It's better for someone to just have no real place to live and just have the corner of somebody's roof to lie down on. It's better to be homeless than to have this means a nagging, difficult wife in a house, in a special house, a house of a nice big house. It's saying when you choose a partner, it's better, for other reasons than that the partner is the right person for you. and you might gain a nice house, a nice apartment, or whatever for whatever reason, but in the end, you're miserable all the time. It's better to be alone, to be independent, than to be with the wrong person. A lesson for life. That is verse 9. Nefesh Rasha Iv Sarah, the soul of a rasha, of an evil person, is bent on bad. This is a theme that we've had several times. we talked about the near Ishaim, the rasha is preparing, he's plowing his field, so to speak, for evil. His preparations are for evil. So the nefesh rasha, the soul of a rasha, desires evil. That's all he wants. Ivsa is from the language ta'ava, which is his desire is he just wants to do bad. Lo yuchan be'enav re'eu. He has, in his eyes, in the evil person's eyes, there is no chen, there is no favor for his re'eu, for others. He has no consideration for other people. Again, there's various ways to translate this verse. But the one that I chose is also consistent with Mitzudos. Ba'anosh leitz yechkam pesi. And here, when a leitz is often translated as a scoffer or someone who makes fun of things. I like to translate it as a cynic, someone who does not take things seriously. But anosh leitz, when a cynic is punished, a person doesn't take things seriously and he ends up losing because of it. He ends up suffering because he didn't take the warning signs seriously in whatever situation it is. Yech kampesi, a fool, but here a fool just means a person who lacks knowledge, can become wise. He can realize and learn his lesson. You see, he didn't prepare. He was told the storm was coming, and he didn't make sure he had enough food and water and a warm place to be to sit out the storm, right? So, and I'm going to learn my lesson from him, so next time I will be prepared. Uvahaskil l'chacham, and this is fascinating. Again, I'm using Mitzudos understanding here. Haskil l'chacham. I'm sorry. I wanted to say here the Gra, the Elio, the Gon Elio of Vilna, the Vilna Gon, he translates the Haskil very often as success. And I think that in this verse 11, and we're going to see in a minute in verse 12, I think that's the best translation for Uvahaskil. So I'm going to use that to translate Uvahaskil l'chacham. And when a chacham is successful, right, when he sees, that same fool sees the lates, the scoffer, the cynic who didn't take things seriously, lose and suffer because of that, and he can learn that lesson. He can also yikach das. He can also take knowledge when he sees success occurring to the chacham, to the smart one, the person who did prepare, the person who did it right. He sees, oh, he was successful. The yech kampesi, a fool can learn from that. So again, a fool, but this doesn't mean, in this context, according to the way I'm translating it, pesi doesn't mean a fool that he's choosing to be foolish. A fool meaning he doesn't know. So a fool is probably not the best translation. A person who lacks knowledge, right? A person who is uneducated can get himself educated by watching others and seeing those who don't take the warning signs seriously suffer in the end. Those who do end up gaining and end up winning in the end, so to speak. So verse 12, again, maskil tzadik leveis rasha. Again, I'm using Mitzudo's translation here. And maskil, again, meaning successful. A tzaddik, a righteous person, can sometimes be the driving force for the success of the household or the estate of a rasha, of an evil person. Sometimes a person who is not a good person associates himself, brings a good person into his organization to help him or her be successful, and they can drive success. However, misalef rishaim lara, but it nonetheless leads the evil person to evil. Why? Because the person never attributes the success to the tzaddik, to the righteous person that is that he brought into his organization, he assumes that it's his own. A rasha, a person who is haughty, thinks he was successful. Think about a businessman who is a cheater, who is a liar, who is just a not dishonest person, and he brings a good person into his organization, and that good person does a lot of work and helps the organization be successful and works hard and brings it. Who gets the credit in the mind of the leader who is untrustworthy? He thinks that it's his own work. He won't give credit to other people. He's too arrogant to give credit to others. He'll take and he will end up going farther down his evil path, thinking that success is due to himself. So again, I was using Mitsudos here for this translation, which I really liked that translation. That's a very important observation in human behavior. Otem ozno mizakas dal, if a person closes his ear to the cries of the poor, of someone who is in bad shape, and we just ignore their cries for help, gam hu yikra v'lo ye'aneh. One day, that person will find himself calling, and he will not be answered. In other words, if we live in a society where people ignore the cries of those that are needy, the cries of those that are suffering, that is the society in where we are all going to end up suffering and crying, and there will be no one there to help us when we need help. Matan baseser. Now this verse here is an interesting one, because it sounds like I'm going to read the translation and what it. Well, let me read it, and you'll see exactly what it sounds like. If someone gives a gift in secret or in private, yich pe'af. And the connotation of private seems like on the surface to be kind of a sinister way, like a way that no one else can see, like sneak him a gift, right? Yich ba'af can calm down anger. V'shochad b'chek chema aza. And a bribe given to a person in their pocket, right, in private, in secret, will soften even strong anger. So it seems like calm people down by paying them off, which doesn't sound quite right, especially in a book which we've over and over again condemned shochad, condemned bribery throughout we must have had that theme, 5, 10, 15 times by now in the book of Proverbs. So if you look at Even Ezra and other commentaries, you explain it in an interesting way, right? And when a person, if you think about this as a person who is mad, a person is not a nice person, they're angry and they want to hurt you, right? Sometimes if you give them a gift in public, right, you may not calm them down. If you try to calm them down by paying them off, it may get them more angry because it's in public. They want to pretend that their anger is a righteous anger, it's a just anger. Nothing is going to make me not want to take revenge on you because you deserve it, etc. However, if you speak to them in private and sometimes paying them off, so to speak, giving them what they want, but doing it in private helps calm things down, as it can calm the situation. So it's advice that can work when done appropriately in the right situation. The next verse, 15, is an interesting one. Simcha latzadik asos mishpat. The commentaries have, of course, as usual, many different ways of understanding this. The way I want to explain this is as follows: Simcha latzadik. Right, it is happy for many of the commentaries, many of the translations and the scholarly translations understand this tzaddik here to refer to God, right? But others don't see it that way. So I'm going to go with that because it just doesn't sound right to me. So simcha, it is a joy for the tzaddik, for the righteous person, to do justice. Right? A person who is a good person loves to be just. He loves to do the right thing. But it is frightening. It is awful to those who are dishonest, those who are evil. Right? In other words, doing the right thing not only comes natural to a righteous person, but he's happy to do the right thing, even if sometimes it might seem to harm you. It might seem difficult. It might seem to be a challenge, but it feels good to do the right thing, However, if you're a bad person, a po'ale oven, a person who does evil, he's afraid to do the right thing. Doing the right thing confronts him with his evil and makes him feel uncomfortable. And then that would be the understanding of verse 15, which I think is very clear and true to the words. I'm kind of putting together a bunch of different classical commentaries to come up with this translation. Thank you again so much for participating. This is the end of the first half of chapter 21. I look forward to studying the second half of chapter 21, and of course the remainder of this wonderful, wonderful book. Each and every verse is just a pearl. It almost feels like a shame to read 15 or 16 verses in one shot, because each one is something you can sit and think about. If anyone wants to communicate with me online, feel free to send me an email at weinrebsaul, that is WEINREBSAUL @gmail.com. Thank you very much and have a wonderful, wonderful day.